Welcome to another episode of David vs. Goliath Podcast. We have an A-lister with us today. We got the lovely, talented, and beautiful Kristen Feden joining my partner in crime, Stan Gipe, on our podcast. Kristen, welcome aboard.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine. I'm so excited to engage in a
It's
conversation.
not every day we get the prosecutor put Bill Cosby away, has a verdict against R. Kelly. I mean, literally, we normally get boo-boos and hobos coming through here. So this is like a big moment for us. I'm not quite sure how to handle myself. Stan, what do we want to lead off with? What do we want to talk about today? Do we want to talk about like the Alexander brothers? We want to talk about R. Kelly, Bill Cosby, Chrissy in general?
No, come on. I mean, Chrissy, okay, I can tell you, Chrissy has ruined memories I had of childhood from long before she was born, right? Okay, I remember picture pages and pudding pops, right? Like in the late 70s into the early 80s, I have core memories of like which couch I was sitting on in my grandparents' house watching Bill Cosby. Hey, will he do another picture page with you? I can talk about pulling out my crayons and pencils, right? I know the theme song to it. And then this man rolls into pudding pops, right? And I can remember the whole through the 80s, it was Bill Cosby and pudding pops, right? And then this man rolls into the 90s and becomes America's dad, right? You've got Mr. Huxtable. There is no more wholesome person in the world. And then I know for the first time I hear that this man's been accused of sex assault, and I think, no way, right? This has to be a money grab, right? So I can tell you, like, I want to know, like, look, R. Kelly, right? Knock him out, right? We kind of suspect he might be. How in the hell do you walk in to prosecuting America's dad for a sex assault claim when everyone's first thought has to be no damn way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. And listen, those were my memories too. In fact, you know, my daddy, God bless his soul, but he was a physician. There's 4 of us running around, so I'm one of 4. And so, you know, people used to call us the Huxtables growing up. You know what I mean? And so when I was called into my boss's office many years ago as a prosecutor, you know, very experienced prosecutor at that point, because I had done tons of, you know, crimes. I had prosecuted homicides, including a capital homicide case. She called me in her office and she asked me to deliver a letter. And I'm like, sure. You know, I would never say no to my boss, but I'm like thinking to myself, why aren't one of the detectives delivering a letter? I have trials that I have to prep for. Like, what is happening? So I said, you know, may I ask, you know, what is this letter in reference to? I'd be happy to deliver it wherever you need it to go. And she was like, oh yeah, we're going to open up an investigation into Bill Cosby. And then she turns around as if it was like just Joe Smo. And I was like, my jaw is now to the ground. I was like, I'm sorry, who? And yes, I mean, I thought the same thing, Stan. I'm like, there's no way. But listen, you know, as a prosecutor, you don't kind of look left or right. You follow the evidence, and that's all where your eyes go. And, you know, even as a civil litigator, that's what we do today. But man, when I started seeing one piece of evidence after another piece of evidence after another piece of evidence, all my memories faded. It was awful.
So I read your Wikipedia page today. Most of our guests don't have Wikipedia pages. Let's start there. So on your Wikipedia page, like, how the hell did you get a Wikipedia page? You got to be a celebrity. So on your Wikipedia page, that the first trial ended up in a mistrial. Then you were called in as a special prosecutor. You'd already gone to private practice and came back to, you did the closing argument and much of the trial in the second round. So take us through those 2 cases. What was different the second time around?
Yeah, you know, one is on the first trial. I played a large role in the first trial. Obviously, I was one of the initial investigators, meaning even though I was a prosecutor, that is part of our job. We are not only a litigator, but we're also an investigator. And so in the first trial, I had done the entire investigation, was there for every pretrial motion, hearing, etc., delivered the opening argument. And my role really was to direct examine the survivor, who was Andrea Constiam. In that particular case, we only were permitted to have 1 prior act witness. And a prior act witness, just for the audience, I know you guys know, is just someone who has, you know, suffered something very similar. So in that case, she was also drugged and sexually assaulted by Bill Cosby. And so we put on that evidence. We essentially called the very same.
Time out for 1 second. I'm not a criminal defense lawyer. Is that common that they only limit you to 1? Is that an outlier?
It differs per state. But in the state of Pennsylvania, it is purely discretionary with the judge. They go through a number of balancing factors. In the first trial, we actually were only permitted 1 prior act witness, and the judge balances it based on the testimony. So if the testimony kind of precludes the court doesn't want many trials within a trial, right? And so if the one testimony and the court deems that was sufficient enough and that additional evidence could be deemed cumulative, meaning repeat after repeat, or prejudicial, the court's going to say, oh, stop, no more prior act witnesses. And so we were only allowed to call one in the first trial, but we actually called 5 in the second trial. And so we that was one of the major differences between the first and the second. And, I know this podcast is national, but give me 2 seconds to give some Philly love. The major difference between the 2 trials was the defense attorney. The defense attorney in the first trial, I had tried many cases with him. He is a phenomenal trial lawyer. He is fantastic. You may know him from representing Meek Mills and some other big named people. Brian McMonagle. He represented Bill Cosby. And let me tell you, I say this all the time. His closing argument in that particular case, he probably talked about the case for 5 minutes of his 45-minute closing argument. He is that charismatic that the jury just fell in love with him. I believe we did poll the jury and it was 10 to convict, 2 not to. And in a criminal trial, that is a mistrial, right? You got to get every single person to vote for convict, very different from, civil. In the second trial, they actually had Michael Jackson's old attorneys. And Michael Jackson's old attorneys actually called a number of witnesses. Brian McMonagle in the first trial put on no witnesses and said, we're done. Michael Jackson's old attorney, called a number of witnesses, and they really, I don't think, played out as well to the jury. And I think that was kind of one of the major differences. But I will tell you, one of the common threads throughout the entirety of both trials was Andrea Constant, who was the survivor in that particular case. And, she is just so authentic. At that point in the trial, she had actually reported it in 2004. And the office declined prosecution in 2005. And so when we were ready to prosecute, when I was called into my boss's office, that was 2014. So she had already had 10 years of healing. And she also had the opportunity to sue him civilly and get, a civil judgment of what she was entitled to. So she had nothing to gain by testifying and everything to lose because, these cases are very invasive to people's privacy. And so I always say she was the common thread because we could not have done it without her.
How was Cosby on did he take the stand?
No, he did not. He did not take the stand.
What was his demeanor like? I mean, you're sitting there, he's right across from you. What was that like?
It was insane. It was really crazy because, he was blind. So, he would look off, but you weren't certain where he was looking or if he could see what he was, if he could see the items or objects in the direction that he was gazing. So that was kind of odd. But listen, he was fully competent, cognizant, saying things the entire time. During my closing argument, he laughed, which, set me off. But he was fully aware of everything, even though I don't believe he could fully see everything.
Was his wife there too?
She came for both closing arguments.
That's got to be tough.
And Rudy came for the opening.
Rudy was there?
Rudy was there.
Oh, boy.
So mad.
Let me ask you, when you first start this trial and you're walking into a courtroom, how many jurors do you need to actually find an impartial jury to judge Bill Cosby? Because, I've always wondered this. I've never had a celebrity trial, right? But you always want, hey, let's find, a panel of jurors who know nothing about my plaintiff, know nothing about the defendants, right? And basically, if you're going to find people who've never heard of Bill Cosby, do you really want them trying a case? Because they're not in touch with society, right? They're just under some rock somewhere. How do you, how many people and how do you go about doing that?
It was difficult, Stan. But I'll tell you, for the first trial, the defense attorney actually raised a legal issue. essentially saying, hey, we can't get a fair trial here in Montgomery County where the sexual assault occurred. We need to move it somewhere else. So, as prosecutors, we're like, listen, we want you to have a fair trial. So go ahead, do your thing. We didn't oppose the motion. We let the Supreme Court decide where do they want us to try this case, or rather, where do they want us to pull a jury from? And the Supreme Court said, you can pick a jury in Allegheny County. And so we packed our bags. We went to Allegheny County and went out there to pick a jury. We picked for the first trial we spent about 3 days picking a jury, which to me is not that long of a time considering it was a celebrity jury. But to your point, Adam, and I can't remember if it was the first or I think it was the second jury trial. The very first trial, everyone knew who he was. And as you know, Stan, that's not the question to strike them. The real question is, knowing him and knowing what you know of him, are you able to put all of that knowledge aside and judge him based on everything you see here on this witness stand, kind of, just based on the evidence that you see at trial? So that's what we had to go off on. And, as lawyers, what we then do is be like, I don't know, this person, has this background. I don't think they can be fair and impartial, even though they said that they could. So we did have, we actually asked some prosecutors who were, skilled and seasoned prosecutors in Allegheny County, because we didn't know that jury pool. We knew Montgomery County, we didn't know Allegheny, to kind of sit with us and help us pick that jury. But to your point, Stan, for that second trial, they did not raise that as an argument, withdrew it. So we actually picked a Montgomery County jury. And so there was one person who said, I don't know who Bill Cosby is. And he was younger. So I'm like,
really?
I know. I was like, there's no way.
You're so full of shit. You don't know Bill Cosby? Come on.
Right. And keep in mind, at that point, even though he was young, maybe he didn't know Bill Cosby, but this was the second time he had been tried. No, you knew. You had to.
By the way, going back a second, why would you get an impartial jury in Allegheny County, being that Philadelphia is the closest media center? So you're getting your news from Philadelphia News. Bill Cosby is ubiquitous. Everyone knows who Bill Cosby is. Like, why would you get an impartial jury in Allegheny versus Montgomery County? I don't really get that argument.
Who knows? The reasoning that they said that I don't agree with is, because he was charged in Montgomery County, putting aside, the obvious legitimate counter argument, which is he's a national figure. The news is everywhere. Mm-hmm. They said the news was based in Montgomery County. The only 3 counties that were similar to because the Supreme Court selects the alternative venue. And in their selection, they have to look at demographics, they have to look at population, they have to look at a number of things. And Philadelphia would have been a similar jurisdiction, and so would Allegheny County. But because Philly feeds off of Montgomery County news because we border one another, they went with Allegheny
What is
County.
Montgomery? It's like the main line?
Yes. You got it.
Okay, I understand. I have relatives from there. Okay, understood.
So, Chrissy, you kind of brought it up a little bit, and and this is kind of something I've always thought about. I think everyone thinks about this. Like when you've got someone like Bill Cosby, when you've got someone that's famous celebrity, they've got essentially unlimited resources to spend to defend themselves in a case, right? You're still the government. It's not like suddenly stuff changes for you because of the defendant. Right? Like it's one thing when you go, hey, it's Chrissy versus Stan Gipe defending someone. It's another thing when you got...
similar thing because you have Bill Cosby resources.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like if you sit there and you're to fight like a whole team like that, how do you do that? And, at the end of the day, pardon the French, but it's got to make you feel good when you kick their ass.
It does. It does. But to your point, man, it was miserable. The first trial only lasted about 2 weeks, 1 week, 2 weeks. But the second trial lasted a month, which I know in the civil and particularly federal civil world is not that long. But man, we're in court every single day from start to finish. As a prosecutor, to your point, Stan, I have 200 other cases. And because I handle homicides, sex crimes, child pornography, cases along that nature, a lot of my cases also have survivors who want to know what's going on with their cases, who want to know when the next court date is, who want to know what they need to, and as a prosecutor, no one's doing my job when I'm in trial. So it would be the most craziest thing where we would literally walk into the judge's chambers to talk about, okay, what's happening tomorrow, what will be the agenda, what witnesses you're calling, etc. The normal stuff after court. And we would literally walk out of the courtroom, check our phone, and they would have filed a million different motions that we now have to wait, go read, research, and be able to respond to the next day before that particular witness or that particular piece of evidence was called in. So to your point, and then even during the investigation, oh my gosh, every single time I turned around, there was something new. Every pretrial issue that you could think of, including like recusing the main prosecutor, not me, but like the DA at the time. I mean, it was just unheard of. But I will say, one of the keys, and I always kind of joke, our appellate team was phenomenal. So, in the DA's office, we have your trial litigators, but then you also have an appellate team, and mind you, like 2 people. But they are some of the smartest people in the world, let me tell you. So they actually sat there at trial with us. They handled a lot of the pretrial hearings, definitely all of the briefings, pretty much. And a real quick joke is that, Matt, you asked me earlier, what was the difference between the 2 trials? Why'd you get 1 versus, 5 in the second trial when we're talking about prior act witnesses? And I always say it's because me and my other colleague argued the motion in the first trial and the appellate team argued it in the second trial. And so I would say, those are the ones you really want arguing your motions.
100%. I get that point. Going back, and this is going to be completely ignorant because I never worked for the government, but when you're on such a high profile trial, they don't assign someone to help you out with your other ongoing cases? A stupid question. Okay. Your look says it all.
I
Okay.
will say,
I strike that question from the record, counsel.
I will say we all worked as a team, though. So I had a lot of colleagues jump in and assist. But I will tell you, when you're dealing with very, and this, both of you guys, as playing lead roles in the Roblox litigation, for example, and also handling LDS matters. When you're dealing with clients who have suffered such a major tragedy, such as the loss of a loved one or sexual assault or aggravated assault, they want to talk to you. They don't want to talk to other people. So, my thought was always, as a government servant, if something happened to me or my mom or my child, I want to talk to who's in charge of that case. You know what I mean? And so I wanted to always put that forward to those individuals, and just being on another case, even though the defendant happens to be a high profile individual, should not, deter my goals and the assistance that I offered to them. So yes, people offered to help, but there were certain cases where I'm like, I got to do this myself.
Understood. Did the survivors you were representing at the time in your other cases, did they have a lot more confidence in you, knowing that you had had been represented, had been the prosecutor tasked with putting Bill Cosby behind bars?
So yes, in that, during the first trial, they had no idea,
Mm-hmm.
but the second trial, yeah. The second trial was a little different because I was a special. And so what I would do, I would get calls, you left the DA's office, I want the Cosby prosecutor on my case. I did get a couple of those calls.
Understand. Got you. But it put you much more in demand, though, afterwards.
You got it.
In the private practice, of course. So then take us to R. Kelly. How did you get involved in the R. Kelly case? I know you handled the civil case.
Yeah, so the R. Kelly case was...
And another weird thing I read, because I really was a fanboy. I went through your whole background today. I know it better than your husband does. I can sit and give your background, but you had 2 verdicts the same day.
I did.
And Stan and I were sitting there. We put our big thinking caps on. So one was in deliberation for a couple weeks while you tried the other one.
Well, here was the thing. They were bench verdicts, not jury verdicts. So the judge took a million years to come out with one decision, and the other judge took a million years to come out with the other. And it just so happened that both came into they were both New York. And so like in New York jurisdiction, it comes in, coming through your email. And I happened to get them on the same day. So 2 different judges, 2 different.
You had a $22 million verdict, and the other one's a 10.5, and you got in the same day?
Yeah.
Shit. You got for a nice dinner that night?
What'd you say?
You got for a nice dinner that night? That had to be a good night.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I did. I was like, wow. But I will say, one of the most rewarding parts was I got to call like 7 different, because the R. Kelly was a 10.5, but it was for 6 people. The 22 million was only for one. So I got to call 6 different survivors, all of whom I represented, like, guess what? So it was nice to be able to deliver that setup.
So this is what against was an OBGYN, or what type of case was this in New York?
Yeah, he was a pediatrician. He was sexually abusing, all of his pediatric patients.
And sorry to draw that assumption, just because we're so used to seeing OBGYNs across the country that have, pediatrician. That's even not that any degree. They're all awful, all just heinous. These are all animals that should be put down. But yes, that's just unbelievable. Dan, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, I just got a quick question. Like, some of the issues you deal with, like, especially with respect to women's sexual rights and violations and stuff like that, over time we become more enlightened as a society, right? Our positions, our feelings as a society change and move, whereas 70s, 80s, maybe even into the 90s, the casting couch might have been a thing and it might have been kind of accepted, and people kind of looked at it. Now, as we move to society, people are like, oh no, that's not an acceptable way to do business and things like that. And you're helping move the needle, right? Like this is an actively moving needle. This isn't static. But let me, and so a lot of people, I'm sure, praise you women, are like, thank you for what you're doing and helping. Have you had any sort of negative backlash? Has anyone ever reached out to you and been like, I can't believe you did it? Like, has any of that kind of stuff happened?
Oh my gosh, yes. Actually, all the time. And actually, give you a crazy story. Bill Cosby. So as a prosecutor, your email, your phone number, it's not really publicly available. But I was in private practice for the second trial, and that one's the one where he was, convicted. I had people, first of all, say all sorts of crazy things to me and put them online in the comments. My husband was like, please don't read the comment section. And the thing is, the reason he told me not to read is because he knows I see red really quickly and I will confront you. Excuse me, why are you saying that to me? And I had one guy, actually a lot of people, but one guy actually emailed me and was like, I hope you die. I hope you and your whole family die and all this other things. I called him up really quickly because he had his phone number. Oh, I think I maybe asked him I said, why don't you jump on the phone with me? I probably was less professional in what I said to him. And he jumped on the phone. When I was done with him, he apologized. The point is that people say a lot of things because they don't know that they're dealing with individuals. It's super easy to type something and not have to know who you're talking to. What that means to me as a person, that phone call was really revealing to me, because it also reminded me is these people don't know me. They don't know what I do. They don't know my heart. They don't know my, and so I'm just going to do what I do because I think that it's the right thing. And there's just a lot of backlash, as you know, when you try to do the right thing.
What was his anger about? You're taking down America's dad? Like, what was it? What did he say to you?
He was like, do you know who Bill Cosby is? He said all this stuff like, as a Black woman, you should be ashamed of yourself. Then I was like, did you hear about the pound cake speech? Did you know he actually made a speech about how most Black men deserve to be in jail? Why? Well, no, not because they commit crimes, but because they wear their pants down low. Oh, and did you ever hear about the pound cake speech where he's talking about Black women? Oh, I went off. Don't try to come at me with history. Absolutely.
Yes.
Not. So I just kind of let him know. I tried to educate him with my, in my
Your
very
charm. He's a
angry
comedian,
way.
comedian and actor. He's a scumbag, though. He's a sexual deviant.
Totally.
No. Mm-hmm.
And the other thing to point out too, Matt and Stan, is for both trials, I made sure that Black women testified. He did not just sexually assault white women. And I think that was a major thing, is that a lot of times when there is a Black man standing accused of sexually assaulting a white woman, who Andrea Constand was a white woman, race absolutely comes into play, even if you don't want it to. And I say race comes into play because jurors don't leave, anything at the door. They bring forth their life experiences. And we can't erase or eliminate the fact that Emmett Till died, in a very similar fashion. And so that's why, in the first trial, the prior act witness was a Black woman. In the second trial, out of the 6 women who testified, the 5 prior act witnesses on Andrea Constand, 2 of them were Black. And so I wanted to make sure that there would be no underlying theme of they're just trying to take a good Black man down, because no, we weren't. We were only trying to take a sexual predator down. And that message, I think, was very clear in both trials, just by calling other women of different races to show that message without, saying it. It's a subtle message that you as a trial attorney have to kind of be aware of what the perceptions will be.
Now, I've looked a little bit at this, and your victim in this case, Andrea Constance, she appeared to be like a very, very strong person. Like when I'm looking at her from the outside, never met her, obviously looking at stuff. But when you see the articles, you see the photos, you see the way she sort of presents herself, holds herself, she's facing cameras and like out there. How much do you think that played a role in being able to actually put Bill Cosby or convict him? Right, because it's hard for you as a person. It's got to be really, really hard for someone as a victim, like come out there and say it herself, especially right. Because I know me, listen to it the first time. Oh, this money grab, something like this, right? And she has got some money. She got millions of dollars for this.
Yeah.
Like, so how was like from her perspective? Did she tell you what was that like for her to go through that?
It was tough. She's very, very strong. She like puts on this wonderful face. And she was like, keep in mind, she's an athlete. She's a college athlete and, played overseas. So, her thing is, I loved this. She says, and if you're a basketball player, I was a former basketball player, you'll understand this reference, always follow through, right? You follow through in your shot, you follow through to make sure that the aim is appropriate and you get that, those 2 points and maybe even the 3. That was her motto throughout. I'm going to always follow through. When they declined charges, our office was not very nice to her. They didn't even let her know. They had the DA went on TV. Oh, she found out on TV that they were not prosecuting her case. And then the fact that she trusted us again, even though it was different people, right? It's still the same office, and she's not even from our country. She's away in Canada. So she was willing to come over here to our country and stand that type of scrutiny. Not once, but twice. So she was nervous. She's very meditative and homeopathic driven. So she's just such a beautiful person inside. And, even when they took breaks during her testimony, she had her little rocks, her meditative rocks, and would just breathe. It was just really refreshing because I was so nervous, but I'm this is what I do every day. This is not something she does every day, and she's getting such scrutiny that she doesn't deserve, So, to your point, she's just such a strong person inside and out, and most importantly, just a loving person, We were looking at there was a recent award for Donna Monsinger, who was also, I believe she was at the trial. I know that we've spoken to her throughout the investigation, but I bring her up because she has multi-million-dollar judgment civilly against Bill Cosby most recently. And I sent her the article and she was like, I'm so excited. I was like, girl, you started this. You know what I mean? You literally started this. And so she's just a powerful person.
That's awesome. Let's transition to 2 scumbag white guys. What about the Alexander brothers? I know you're working on that case. Those are 2 deviant scumbag. I don't have a good word that properly sums them up. We heard about, this is a little bit of a transition, but I know a number of individuals who are kind of in Miami society or hanging out with the uber wealthy people in Miami, and they'd come across the Alexander brothers. There was whispers about them in the community for years that circulated. They were very handsy with females, inappropriate, that they had these strange parties. And then I know that you're handling some of those civil cases.
That's right.
Tell us about, what you can actually speak to, what you've learned about the Alexander brothers, because these are some of the most heinous monsters that I've, at least I've read about. And there's a pattern of this, where there's smoke, there's fire. I think there's over 40 women who've come forward now. It might even be more than that.
Probably
I know there's some civil lawyers beside yourself, also a couple in New York who have been handling these cases for several years now. And talk about having all the resources in the world. These guys had millions and millions of dollars still. I think they still do.
Yeah, totally.
So tell us about those cases.
Those cases are just equally as horrific. And they have, like you said, endless resources, a team of attorneys to basically file every motion, circumvent the system in any way. that they can. I'm so thankful that the conviction came through, conviction of guilty on all counts.
Yep.
That's
Yeah,
huge.
that was 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Huge.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you guys know, that renders, if you're suing them individually, that renders that civil trial null and void. Pretty much it's just going to be an inquest if it's in New York, or an assessment of damages trial, because there is already a finding of that intentional tort. And so those cases are going to be a little bit easier, if you will. But there's other cases where he has not been charged for the underlying contact, or they have not been charged for the underlying contact. But yet you see that common theme that you pointed out, Matt. It's the drugging, it's the raping. In most cases, it's the three of them working in concert to essentially take a woman, fly her into this other spot, and then sexually assault her. Essentially what you see, and you see it throughout all of these sex abuse cases, you see individuals using their power, which sometimes is defined by their wealth and their status in society, and stripping a person, whether it be a female or a male or a them, of their autonomy, And most people think to themselves, and I hear this all the time, and I think it's important to address, they're super rich. Why would they want to rape somebody? They can get any woman in the world. Sometimes it's not about that. Rape is never about sexual gratification. It is about the power. I want that, and I want that now, and I'm going to take it. It's just absolutely horrific.
Yeah, it was case after case where the woman had no recollection how they wound up there, let alone what happened to them. Very just awful.
And you see that so frequently when sexual assault is facilitated through the ingestion of an intoxicant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times these women will blame themselves, I shouldn't have drank so much, not realizing that it really wasn't the quantity by which they drank. It's that somebody slipped something unbeknownst to them in their drink. But nevertheless, whether they drank too much or they went to the wrong spot, it is not an invitation for sexual assault. But a lot of that blame and humiliation kind of forces them to want to conceal it and not speak up.
So sad. Awful. And there's no obviously making a sexual abuse survivor whole, but will they be able to get their pound of flesh? Will there be compensation at the end of the road? Do we know what they have in terms of their finances and how much has already been stripped due to the, or I should say depreciated based on the legal fees and what they have going forward?
Yeah. So they have so much wealth. I can't imagine that the legal fees have eaten it up or anywhere close to it. But one of the things I'm uncertain about as of right now is whether or not the money is tied up in different corporations and not into them individually. So that's the one thing I'm, looking into as we prepare to sue them. You had the real estate agents with the two brothers, real estate agency with the two brothers, and then you have the security business with the one brother. And so between both of those companies, trying to attribute or impute liability on those, that kind of is dependent upon the survivor and what they experienced. But with regard to even getting into court, not even being heard on the merits, we have statute issues left and right, because a lot of these assaults happened so many years ago. And while New York, where a lot of the sexual assaults have occurred, have done major things in terms of reform and statute limitation, elimination, or revival windows, there's still a lot of appellate issues, at least two of my survivor clients are experiencing now. So we'll see if they're even going to be able to have their day in court.
Understood.
Do you have any element of really educating victims in society about what a sexual assault is? Because it's not easily defined. Like, I think you'll find a lot of women, females particularly, will, be enamored by someone, get into a situation, and then you maybe not realize that anything short of yes is no. Right? You end up in a situation and they get, they're doing something they don't want to do. Someone takes advantage of them, forces them over an edge they didn't want to get to. That even if you put yourself in a situation, that doesn't mean you've agreed to be sexually assaulted. you as a person can say no at any point during this process. You've never gotten to a point where you don't have the right to refuse. Right? Is that something that sometimes you have to like make sure society and people understand that just because you went there and it was late and it might have been expected, you still have the right to refuse and it shouldn't have happened to you?
You got it. Exactly. And actually, I do like a lot of nonprofit work around that topic. I do believe that it is something that we have to start when the kids are young. You know, you can't go and like say to a 3-year-old, don't sexually assault, but you can talk about good touch, bad touch. You could talk about, you know, and even then when my kids were growing up, there wasn't good touch, bad touch. It was, if anybody touches you, let mommy know. Because I want to be the one who can assess with my, you know, I'm only 25 today. So with my, you know, 25-year-old birthday,
I thought you were 23.
whether or not that touch was
I was
good or
wondering,
bad.
how'd you practice so long at such a young age? It's crazy.
Yeah.
Did you pass the bar when you were 8?
Yeah,
Go on.
got it. Smart, I guess.
Still got
it. But to your point, yes. And that's why it's so important. The work that the three of us do is getting that word out. When you sue people, you are putting them on public blast that this behavior is not acceptable. That is one form of educating people. Another form of educating people is, like I said, going into the schools and talking to them about consent. I know it sounds like, you know, for the older generations, like, no, you know, that may mess up the mood. It's better than going to jail. Making sure people are consenting, making sure that if you see someone has too much to drink, you are not going any further, you know, in terms of any sexual contact. And just making sure that everyone is a consenting party.
Mm-hmm.
Gaining consent in any way that you need to, right?
You know, and I think it's really shifting the mindset, right? Because the question shouldn't be, did she say no? The question should be, did she say yes?
Right. Exactly.
And I think that's kind of the mindset that needs to shift, right?
Yes.
So, quick transition. I know you handle sexual abuse cases nationwide. Can you speak to survivors under like a look back statute, under a revival window? How do you educate survivors that they may still have a valid claim, despite the fact that the abuse occurred years ago, possibly even decades ago?
Yeah. So even that $22 million judgment that I got on the same day as the R. Kelly verdict, that was a revival case. That was a case that was filed under the Child Victims Act. And in that particular case, you know, to your point, educating people. When I got the first call, it was 3 different of his patients. And they were like, listen, you know, I don't know that we have a case. We have no evidence at all. But what we can tell you is that I don't know these other 2 ladies, but we were all sexually assaulted by the same pediatrician. When we started looking into that case, can I tell you, I probably spoke to about 200 different women who have been sexually assaulted. And ultimately we filed 105 cases. And the only reason we didn't file all 200 is because some people don't want to go forward with litigation, understandably. And so we filed every single claim. You know, one thing I always tell people is, listen, if you are interested in filing a civil lawsuit, call an attorney, because they may be able to find the evidence that you don't think exists. When we started uncovering things, we found all sorts of things like police reports that those 3 had no idea about. They never charged him, but there were still police reports out there, and we were able to find additional witnesses. And so there's different things that we can do through the court system, through different legal avenues like FOIA requests or freedom of information, getting information from governmental entities that people who aren't in this field don't know exist. So there's different things. So if somebody says, hey, this happened so long ago, I would still encourage them, if it's what they want to do, to pursue litigation. Go to the police if that's what they want to do. Some people do not want to go to law enforcement. I don't pass judgment on them. But call an attorney, figure out whether or not you have a claim, and if so, what's the best way to gather enough evidence to file a lawsuit.
So, Stan, Chrissy texted me this morning. She was nervous to appear on the podcast, but I know she's full of shit. She was just trying to humor me. But we're at minute 40, and I have like 4 topics I haven't even hit on. Usually we're at minute 15. We're wondering, like, what the fuck else we're going to talk about. So do you like the color blue? We got to wrap up soon. We got like 5 minutes to go. I want to, a project that I guess we're all working on together, which is Roblox. And I think Roblox is a segue into other platforms like Discord. And we're seeing this across, it's uniform across all these platforms are almost like havens for pedophiles. They're fertile hunting grounds for the sick and deviant, where there's very little policing involved in terms of moderation. And I want to be careful because it's not about the content. We want to avoid Section 230, and I don't want to bore people about legalese, but it's the construct of these platforms were never safe in its intended purpose. Like, it's nowhere is it normal for adults to speak to children that are not related to them, but that goes on all day long unabated on these stupid platforms. What are your thoughts about the Roblox case? Because this is different than what you normally handle.
Totally. But to your point, it is so similar to what we handle, but very different. Why is it similar? Mm-hmm. Because we're talking about a defect in design that is so clear as day, but yet the big companies like a Roblox, like a Discord, they continue with these defect designs. Why? For the money.
Yeah, they want to onboard as many people as possible.
Exactly. So they don't care that the parental controls are hidden and that parents don't have full access to it. They don't care that they like to say, hey, we don't have these perpetrators on there, but yet they allow these same perpetrators, some of which have been convicted, to go and make account after account after account after account to a platform that is marketed for children. Literally, they're little blocks. They don't care that there's literally Diddy sites from Puff Daddy or Sean Puffy Combs, who was just convicted of sex trafficking. They don't care that there were Epstein. Like, they don't, and I understand what you're saying with regard to moderation, but the product itself is defective because they don't do the age verification. They essentially, as you pointed out, are a hunting ground because what they're doing is because they fail to put the proper safeguards in place, they are enabling sexual predators to meet children. And in some cases, what results is predatory grooming. But in some cases, what also results is child sexual abuse material, which is out there forever to be exchanged. Sometimes it leads to kidnapping and sexually assaulting these children.
We both have some of those cases right now. It's horrific. Yeah.
Exactly. And they don't care. They're only
How did not know that was going to go wrong? Like, how did you not know the train's going to go off the fucking tracks when you're offering Robux as a form of currency that adults can hold over a children's head, that they'll pay you to the adolescent mind that's still developing and can't appreciate or contemplate the danger involved with, I don't know, sharing a photo of their genitalia in exchange for $100. You ask mom and dad for $100 when you're a child, they're going to tell you to pound sand. At least I would. My parents didn't have any money. So, but you ask for $100 on a Roblox platform, there's some deviant out there that's going to give you $100 to give you a picture of their. It's just like, how the fuck did you not realize this is going to go wrong? By the way, you can curse in this podcast. It's a sick, deviant world that we live in. Sad.
Well, even if you don't realize it, right? Once you see it is going wrong, right? How many kids need to be kidnapped? How many kids need to be raped before you go, wait, there's some unintended consequences going on here, right? Things are happening, right? Okay, if every pedophile on the internet knows to go to Roblox, how does Roblox not know to stop them? Right?
Yeah, Stan, great point. And how's that creep David Baszucki, the CEO, go? He's on a podcast, and what he say that this is a great opportunity called sexual deviation and predatory behavior and predation of children. A great opportunity for Roblox. Great opportunity, you fucking scumbag. What'd you think was happening in your company? Like, really? That Nothing speaks better to the corporate culture at Roblox. I hope the lawyers at Cooley are listening. Like this, you guys are representing complete creeps and scumbags.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, and I'm not on a steering committee, so I can get away with saying stupid comments. You guys are. That's all right. So any final questions or comments, Stan, before we wrap up? We got to let Chrissy get back to all of her clients. She's got a lot more clients than us, so much more successful. But go on.
Like I got lots of comments and everything else. I could talk to Christy. Like I told you this before we started. I could probably talk to Christy for hours just about some of the fascinating things she's.
I would love to over a beer. We also want you to come in and try a couple of cases with us.
Guys, it would be a dream.
For us, not for you. You're like,
for me.
He says that to everybody. She wants the referral. We dream of this. The opportunity to get Kristen Feden and try one of our cases.
I would totally do it. You know it.
With us. We want to learn from you. I think we're damn good, but I think you're even better. So I want to wrap this up. Stan, you want to give the farewell to everyone and wrap this episode up. Before we go, you got to tell us, how do people get a hold of Chrissy Feden? Like, they want Chrissy Feden in their case, and I'll shit you not, if they call our office and they look for you, we're gonna pass it along. Unless it's like a 8-figure case, they're gonna be like, "Who the fuck's Chrissy Feden? She's horrible." How do we get a hold of you, Chrissy?
All you have to do is Google me. You can find my website, my phone number, my email. All of my information is right on there.
Was that like a dig because you have a Wikipedia page, you asshole? Like, we don't have a Wikipedia page. You can just find us. Fuck off.
All
right, so wrap it up.
Website.
All right. So this has been one of our most fun episodes we've ever did, and one of the most entertaining. This is, I'm Stan Gipe. This is my partner, Matt Dolman, and we are very honored to be wrapping up another edition of the David vs. Goliath podcast with our esteemed guest, Chrissy Feden. I hope you guys have enjoyed this as much as we have, because this has been an extreme pleasure for me. I can tell Matt's enjoyed it too. Chrissy, we really, I can't tell you how much we appreciate getting to have 45 minutes, almost an hour of your time telling us some of the insights into some of the things we've read about on a national basis for years. So I really appreciate getting a look behind the curtain on some of this. Thank you.
The pleasure was all mine. I really appreciate you guys letting me be on your wonderful podcast.
Thank you.